Okay, welcome everyone to another episode of What's the Buzz. I am your one-time host, not Danny McKeever. I am Jason Schutte, our creative director at Apis Productions, and with me is our marketing director, Jane Goldman. And on this episode, we're going to talk about branding. And really the purpose, of this episode is to dive into like what is brand, what is it, go really going beyond the logo, thinking beyond just color palettes and like the simple elements of what most people think of a brand being composed of, into like what is your brand and how does it work, why does it work, what do you need to have in place, and what are the key elements of making a brand work for you. So with that, let's kick it off with an intro. Jane, you're reasonably new to the Apis team. Could you please give everybody a little bit of an intro?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Jane Goldman, and I am excited to be part of the APIS team. I have a background having worked in ad agencies and in-house, from brands like Dunkin' Donuts to financial companies like Citizens Bank and insurance companies as well. So I kind of have a broad background in creative and strategy. And so I'm excited to really be able to bring some of those skill sets to the APIS team and to our clients here, especially around branding, where it's really an opportunity to help create a distinction in the marketplace for how customers think about you. So that's my little lead in to our conversation there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, diving right in, right? Like we want to talk about how brands can shape trust, perception, and really the growth arc of your business. And the place to start is like let's define a brand. What is a brand substantially? As far, like not not just the visuals, not the look, but like in terms, for the context of this discussion, how would you define a brand in terms of what we're talking about here?
Yeah, I think for the way I look at it is that, the brand is how you shape the business. Every piece of how you make decisions about your business is shaped by your brand. And that's how, where there's opportunity to sit in the marketplace to be um, distinctive to other competitors, where there's that white space. Two, the reason why you started the business. What is I'm not going to go down the believe in your why necessarily, but there's a reason you started your business. It's a promise of the business to make things better for customers, to make the insurance buying process easier, to, whatever those reasons may be. Then a lot of the decisions you make as a business come from that. What kind of products, services are you offering? How do you go about doing those? And then that all sets up the marketing that falls from it also. So it's almost like brand sits above marketing in helping to shape that business plan that then gets executed on. That's how I see it. I don't know, Jay, if you have a different perspective of that, but
No, I did. That's very much in line with the way that I think about it. And again, it's about shaping perception using the available tools, right? Because a
Mhm.
consumer will look at you and, if you do everything and you're the company that, hey, we offer every kind of service, you're a complex entity, right? And you're going to attract certain kinds of people who are looking for very complex service plates versus, hey, we're the small hometown agency. We help you with home, auto, and life, right? And it's very
Mhm.
simple, it's very understandable to the consumer, and there's a way that a brand wraps around each of those things that helps you as a consumer connect to that brand. And like I think back, just as an example, there, we had small local insurance agencies in the town that I grew up in. And those people, they sponsored the local baseball teams, and they were present, in the parades and the events, and like the way that they expressed who they were is a brand. It was much deeper than just their logo. They were really connected to the community that they served. And that
Mhm.
connection really was the perception. It wasn't about the products that they offered anymore. They were the people who helped protect the community. And
Mhm.
I think that so much of brand and those decisions that you make are driven by like who do we want to be, right? To our core or our key consumer.
Mhm.
And I think that's a nice segue too into one of the key elements of a brand, building an emotional connection and trust with your consumer audience, right?
Yep.
Number one, identifying who that audience is purposely. Not, our audience isn't people who are buying life insurance because, man, there are a lot of people across the United States buying life insurance. Our
Yes.
audience is women between the ages of 35 and 50 who live in the state of Massachusetts, who work in jobs in this sector. That, like, in that sense, it's much easier to build an emotional connection and trust with a very well defined audience, and not all of them are necessarily that well defined. But maybe let's talk a little bit about, and give me some of your thoughts, Jane, on what role the brand serves in creating that kind of emotional resonance that makes a consumer loyal to you, want to do business with you.
Yeah, I think it's the same as any relationship, really. It's, building consistency in how you engage and interact. Um, and that over time builds that trust. It builds that emotional resonance. So, in the same way that you are building a relationship with anybody, you want to kind of have some of those same grounding fundamentals as you're building out your brand. That is making sure that how you speak to things are similar, that you do things that don't feel outside how, all of a sudden do something that doesn't feel like what you would expect. And there's ways for brands to be able to grow. Consistency does not necessarily mean matching luggage, that everything has to look exactly the same. But the feel that you get from different pieces of communication should at least be within the same family as that would be. And, if you have different audiences, you may have different ways you have to flex that communication to be consistent. If you think about different well-known brands, they have often different campaigns to reach different audiences that use different sort of vehicles. Allstate has a couple campaigns that they run. One of my favorites, and I know one we've talked about a lot with Mayhem, really leans into humor, but then they've also had other campaigns where it's more serious, and it's, it really leans into the trust and, longevity of the company and all of that. So they're trying to reach different audiences. It's still the same brand, but they have leaned in harder on different aspects of their brand personality. Um, and when they do that, though, they are completely consistent in both of those veins as they are doing that. So I really think it's about being able to, there's work to be done to get to what that looks like for a company, to help have that foundation so that when the creative team goes off to do the work, they have a good map to help them stay on track of what is on brand or not on brand, so that that consistency stays, front of mind as well.
Yep. Yep. No, and I think you're absolutely on. There are a lot of great examples in the insurance industry. I mean, like Allstate, Mayhem versus Jake from Allstate, right? Like very,
Mm-hmm.
very different feeling kind of campaigns, but in terms of like the way that they're expressing their brand, it's very consistent. It's very polished. It speaks to a very well defined. One speaks to a male audience, one speaks more to a female audience, right? And even the placements as a man, I watch a lot of football during the football season, and Allstate saturates the college football market with Mayhem commercials. But if you change the channel to something else, you won't see those Mayhem commercials put in it. Like, it really is the way that they take that core message and they say, okay, well, this is the part of that core message that these groups of people are going to get, and this is the part of the core message that other people are going to get. And again, understanding which voice is going to get the right emotional connection with which audience.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a keystone of good branding. And also leads in kind of to another direction that I wanted to talk about because it's really an area of confusion. Branding versus marketing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it is a lifelong marketer, right? I think of my tools of the trade as like, well, you've got social media and you've got paid advertising and you've got, like, and early in my career, it even took me a long time to understand how does the brand kind of filter into marketing, right? Is the
Mhm.
they're not the same activity, they're not the same thing, and they're not really interchangeable. Like can you talk maybe a little bit about your philosophy in branding versus marketing, and try to clear up some of the common confusion?
Yeah. I mean, you see this all over LinkedIn all the time, and there's always, somebody puts up a post. This is branding versus marketing versus whatever, content marketing. And I think the biggest thing is that the branding is the thing that you do, that you set up, and you may tweak it over time, right? You may make adjustments, you may refine it, but it's really something that is done infrequently. It should be. You don't want to keep changing your branding because then it makes it harder for your customers to identify you. It becomes confusing. This is like branding is like the pillar activity of who you are as a company. As we talked about earlier on this podcast, like the idea of your reason why for starting your company, understanding sort of where you fit in the uh, market as an opportunity. Those are all really core pieces to brand. Marketing is how you get that information out. That's how and you're doing that all the time. Marketing is an ongoing process of evolving and changing. New channels come out. You're evolving how, with AI, there's an aspect of, how marketing gets integrated using AI. Branding, not so much. I mean, there's ways to use it, but it's not the same sort of things. I think when you look at sort of the hierarchy, as I mentioned before, I think branding really helps to guide those marketing decisions. It sets the foundational path for what you're going to do going forward. I think across your business as well, especially in the marketing space. Um, you wouldn't invert it the other way. So there is sort of like a way where branding sits at sort of like figuring out who you are. It's really hard to do good marketing if you don't have clarity around what your brand is. And I think when you see companies that all the ones that people pick up on, whether it's like, Progressive or Allstate and Mayhem and all that, they have a really good crystallized view of who they are as a company. And it makes it easy to make those communications that then stand out and stick out because they can, with almost precision, be able to say, like, okay, creative team, go off and do this is what we want to highlight. And they understand and know because it's very clear. There's a lot of work that comes to doing that part. And I think we're all really eager to get to the doing. But I think it's an important sort of, you got to do your homework before you can kind of get to the next step with that. And so I think that's the biggest difference, really. It's coming back to the who you are versus how you kind of communicate out that information
Yeah.
to your different audiences.
Well, yeah, and I think Liberty Mutual and in the Limu Emu, right? Like a lot
Mm-hmm.
of brands, and particularly in the insurance space, just because of the nature of what we do, it's very serious. They like to try to take a humorous, and I think you made a good point that these are longitudinal activities. This is things that like you don't make three commercials that feature an emu and now this is our brand. It takes a long time to really develop that concept and say, well, how does this connect to people? Is it through humor? Is it through a very striking visual identity? Is it through the personality of the characters involved? And I think a lot of that stuff really adds up to a full brand. I don't want to say complex. The word that comes to mind is complex, but it's
Yeah.
like, when you open the cupboard and the cupboard is full, you know that the cupboard's full, and sometimes it's not full. And
Yeah.
I guess maybe as a segue then into, let's talk about some of the elements of a strong brand, right? The
Mm-hmm.
things that people are going to be familiar with, right? Your logo, your fonts, your colors. If there's distinctive image treatments as a creative director, these have been the things that have been, like at the core for my entire career of how do you differentiate how, given that I'm a life insurance agent, right, or a life insurance agency, and the guy next door to me does the exact same thing as I do, and the guy next door to him does the exact same thing, making that feel different, right, with visual identity, logo, fonts, colors. There's only so far that I as a creative director can take things without input from, and
Mhm.
to speak to what you had said earlier, Jane, what's your why as a business? Why do you exist? What made you come into existence to do the thing that you're doing? And that, though, right there is where the seeds of what makes you unique and
Mhm.
distinct really kind of live. But your visual identity really is only the skin. It's the most surface element of your brand. Let's talk about some of the other ones. Things that are definitely in your wheelhouse as well as mine. But tone of voice, core message.
Yeah.
Like developing some of those elements. What are your thoughts on what are the most essential elements of developing a key differentiator in your brand?
Yeah, I think it's really being able to boil down to one statement that you can put out there over and over and over again that people will walk away with. And the best example I can think of is Geico. 15 minutes will save you 15%. That they've hammered that out in the marketplace 20 years. I mean, I don't know how, it's been a long time, right? Like, and they still go back to it. That hasn't changed. It's not a glamorous, sexy tagline, but it is memorable. It is short. And when you're thinking about insurance, what comes to mind? I think that is the biggest thing with the distinctive assets, be it a core message, a tagline, the logo, a character. The things that when someone's like, okay, I'm ready to buy insurance, that comes across what flashes into your head first. And those are the things that then, when you're putting together your list of folks to look at, your short list, you want to be on that short list. And so these are all tools that help you get onto that short list when someone thinks about you. You may never have bought insurance before. You could, I think back to stories I've heard of, the kids and the gecko. They want to they love the gecko. They're not buying insurance. They may influence their parents to be like, oh, I should go look at that insurance, perhaps. But it's memorable and it's fun and so it has like stickiness to it, and that's the piece I think that's really important. And
Well,
then going back to just sort of the consistency message, again, the repetition of
exactly,
Geico using that line over time,
exactly.
it's just
You
embedded. It's become part of culture almost,
I feel like today in today's era of streaming and how fragmented people watch, there's a lot of, I'm a little bit older. I remember when every third or fourth commercial that you saw on TV was a caveman or a gecko,
Yep.
right? And the key, like really translating that message of, hey, 15 minutes, 15%. What are, it doesn't seem like a lot from a language standpoint, but like as a brand marketer, right? Like there's a lot of things that a consumer is going to take in, and
Hmm.
repetition is very important to get that message to really sink in. But what does Geico do? We make it fast, we make it easy, and we're not going to rock the boat in your life with something that's going to make you change everything that you do. 15 minutes or more is just going to save you money, right? And
Hmm.
they have now positioned themselves as the like we're here to help you. We're going to give you a really clean comparison. Like they built out a toolkit that said, "Hey, even if you're not buying it from us, we want you to save money. We want you to get." And they built this brand perception that like, no, we as a company are here to do a very specific thing. And if you want that thing, we're the company that you come to versus mayhem.
Hmm.
Like, and I think that it's a very interesting comparison and contrast that, like, no, we
Yeah.
protect you from the unexpected, and we want to illustrate to you a thousand different ways that life is going to throw that unexpected thing in your path. Those are two very different brand positions as companies, and as a result, they acquire two very different customer audiences who are buying for very different reasons.
And I will say that Geico, there are plenty of companies now who are using online tools to be able to get you a quote in 15 minutes and that aren't using brokers that will save you 15%, but they can't say it. I mean, they can, but they can't because Geico owns it.
Yep.
So that's another piece about the consistency and the, as marketers, we like shiny objects. Like, okay, we get tired of a thing, but having that consistency is what builds that reputation and builds that memory in people's heads. And then you own it too in the marketplace. And that's another piece that's really valuable. I mean, when they talk about valuing brands and putting dollar amounts on them, for especially very large ones, a lot of it is that perception. Warren Buffett talks about your brand is your moat for your company. It's the thing that you can't, it gives you that protection of who you are. So, like, that's a really important reason to lean into having, wanting to build a strong brand,
Yep.
um, is that value too.
Yep. And I think that one of the key points that leads into is like why branding is so important in insurance and financial services, right? Like
Mhm.
having outlined, I think we've done a pretty good job of detailing some of those points. There's probably a few that we missed because there are many, but
Of course.
it's the consistent thing. Why is this so important, particularly in the insurance industry? And to me, I think a lot of those high level examples, people say, well, my insurance agency clearly is not Geico, right? I don't spend
Hmm.
Geico money. I don't and
Yep.
and while that's true, it's like macrocosm, microcosm, right? Like what
Hmm.
exists at the top level, you can see the way that all of these carriers have differentiated themselves from each other. It's like they're carving out a piece of the pie that's
Hmm.
shaped in the way that they want to eat for their company, right? And of course, everybody wants to make a big, huge piece of pie and take as much as they can. But the real truth is that the marketplace only lets you cut a piece of pie that's a certain shape, right? Other people exist. There's competition. There's if you want your piece of pie to grow, you need to work and you need to spend a lot of time and effort and energy. And branding is really the thing that outlines the size and the shape of your piece of pie, really activated by marketing. But I really think that it's super important to understand because again, going back to the beginning, um, brand being all about trust, all about building an emotional connection with a very specific group of people.
Hmm.
To me, it's critically important in the insurance industry. Can you talk about like why you think, or if there are some reasons that you think might be, you know, compelling as to why, clients of ours, people who operate in this industry should be looking at branding.
Hmm. I mean, I think first off, it's a commoditized sort of industry, right? Like we can't pricing isn't a lever we get to play with. And there's, when you look at like your marketing piece, there's a limit to how much you can, manipulate or not manipulate, it's the wrong word, but like leverage those different levers. So if you are, thinking about that, you've got place, product, price, and promotion. And promotion becomes the one where you can really do the most with because you don't have the same regulations. Obviously, there's like certain legal and compliance. I'm going to say that
Yeah.
now to keep everybody in line. But beyond that, you can be really creative in how you go about bringing that information forward. And I think that is where there's an interesting opportunity in the insurance and financial space because it is also a topic that either people are interested in because they know they like want to take care of the financial aspect and they're kind of financial money heads, I'll call them for lack of a better word, who are like really into knowing all the ins and outs about, they know what their portfolio is, they know where all their, what their financial life sort of is looking like, and they're very active in it.
Yep.
And then there are people who, when you talk about it, cringe and run away, and they're like, nope, I don't want to think about that.
Yep.
Um,
I would
and
be that
so,
guy.
yeah, right, me too. I'm working on it, but yes. And I think, it's tricky because how do you get people to pay attention to a thing that's really important,
Yep.
but they have an adverse reaction to. And so I think, looking at the way that you can use behavioral economics and psychology to really kind of help get people to think about those things is important.
Yep.
and using brand to help kind of wrap that around. Again, as you said before, humor. Look at Flow, look at Limu Emu, look at there's a lot of humor to kind of get people to pay attention to a topic that they may or may not want to.
Yeah.
And I think in a when you're talking about things like that, it's really important to figure out like who you are so that you can do that jumping off point. If you don't know what you stand for as a company, it's really hard to be able to find the right way in that is actually going to connect with somebody in a meaningful way of how you're going to help them or what you can do for them. So I think that's really one of the important pieces in the financial and insurance industry as a whole is that piece. I think, going to school and like when you first start talking about commodity products, you think about soap. It does the same thing. You wash, right? And insurance is one that fits into that. And actually, most financial services too.
Well,
There's not a
and
regulations. You can only do so much.
I would give the caveat too, because I think about this very, very often, just myself. Well, that's not literally true. Like
Mm-hmm.
we work with clients all over the spectrum, and
Yep.
they can in a very complex way illustrate how many of these products are radically different from each other, but to the consumer looks at a life insurance policy as a life insurance policy. The only real variable to the consumer is how much is it going to cost me each month, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, do AM best ratings as a consumer, AM, I have to know what AM best ratings are in order for
Yep.
them to be impactful to my decision, right? And I think that, one of the things that is really a key is a strong brand will build authority with a consumer.
Mm-hmm.
Apple. When you think about even people who are far outside of the insurance industry, strong brands govern and mold our lives. The Wall Street Journal, from the media and the journalism that we read, like those brands become edifices that we expect very specific returns from. When I go to
Mm-hmm.
the Wall Street Journal, I expect a certain level of journalism, right? When I
Yep.
read The Economist, I expect to get so, in that sense, that's a part of what a brand does is it develops that authority. And I have heard, there's a wonderful human out there who writes in the insurance industry. The insurance industry it described as sold, not bought. And in any
Mm-hmm.
industry, in any place where the prospect is sales, brand becomes crucial because it's
Yep.
it's the thing that if you think about you're walking through a bazaar, right, in Egypt, and every booth is the same, right? Like at that point it's pure happenstance that I go past one booth versus any other booth because there's no impacting factor that's making me go to this one versus like brand is the thing that makes one say, hey, I've got a sign here that shows
Mm-hmm.
you what you can get here. And my sign, it looks like a rug. So, my store has rug. There's those deep, complex connections that consumers make. And
Yep.
particularly in the insurance industry where the consumer does need to be sold this. They, like
Mm-hmm.
not in the sense that it's not something that they don't need, but like you're not going to buy it off of the shelf because to the consumer, it is such a commodity. It's such
Mm-hmm.
whether I buy it from you or I buy it from him, I'm buying a life insurance policy and it's all the same to me. And
Yep.
I think for me that is one of the most crucial areas where brand comes in.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Let's also dive into mistakes to avoid, right? Just do you have any thoughts or just real common sense advice to anybody who's watching right now or ourselves because it's always good to have these reminders. That there are some common pitfalls, some ways that you can go awry. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think making sure that you don't tinker with it too much. I think there's like once you develop a brand, one, you need a brand strategy. If you don't have one, talk to us. We can help you with that. But I think that having a brand strategy, it's important for everyone who works at a company to be able to say like this is the elevator pitch of who we are and why. And if you can't get multiple people aligned on that, like an entire company really aligned on that, and saying the same thing, whether you're doing marketing or not, like sales, whatever, you need to have that's like that should be a very foundational thing to be doing. Um, and it's important to be able to then do all the other things that come from that. So if you struggle with that, I think that is something also another sign that you need to really take a step back and look at your brand strategy and say like, what is our brand? Um, and then I think really being consistent with that. Once you have it figured out, not changing it too frequently, and it's more about making, you hear about rebrands and that kind of thing. A lot of times they're actually more just small tweaks to things versus a full on rebrand, right? Like a full rebrand would be new logo, new colors, new positioning, new messaging, at a really deep level that changes the trajectory of things for a company. And you see that a lot when maybe a company's not performing very well and it needs that rejuvenation to happen to realign everything. Like a brand evolution is really more where a lot of companies, need some help in terms of just like, okay, things have shifted. Now we need to refine some things. Um, Maybe it's tweaking the logo. Maybe it's looking at messaging and refining it so that there, instead of 10 things, we're saying, and
Yep.
getting that crystallized. I think that's another opportunity to really just like, if you're trying to say too many things about your brand, how, that can also be a mistake because it can be it can be confusing to the market, to the customer. They may not truly understand when you're trying to say too many things. So I think really, do you have a brand strategy? Are you, do you need to refine it? And kind of taking a look at that and then really thinking about, what your messaging is and how consistent you can be within that and staying in that because when you do campaigns you can do some stuff that's outside of your brand a little bit, but the majority of the things you're doing need to really live in that centralized place, I think.
Yep. Yeah. And I also from a creative standpoint, I think it's important to note that a lot of people, you mentioned rebrand, and that's it. Like I've always hated that word because it's so
Mm-hmm.
imprecise, and you're absolutely right. For most companies, what you really need to do is a little bit of polish, a little bit of, when we
Yeah.
started our company 10 years ago, we made these products and they were aimed at these audiences. And right now, today, we make these products and we are aimed at these audiences, right? And that may mean that you want to revise your logo or your color palette, or you want to update your website to be more modern or more like there are a lot of ways to take the brand that you already have. And I think it is summarily much rarer to see a company doing a true rebrand, right? Where no, we are no longer selling paper clips, we are now selling pens. So we're going to change our name, our colors, our stationery, our website, everything that we do. And those terms are used so interchangeably. I really do like the term brand evolution because your
Yeah.
brand is an evolving object. It's a thing that,
Mm-hmm.
every year as new audiences, new products, new internal personnel come into the company, the nature of who your brand is in who your company is changes. And
Mm-hmm. And
those
as
things should
yeah, and
always
as you
be,
have to deal with new things too, right? Like new technologies come into play
yep.
and you might need to adjust to kind of align to that too.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So, in summary, I guess, doing the right things, building your brand in the right way is all about perception and trust and consistency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like building those customer audiences. We're huge believers in audiences at Apis. We talk about it a lot in calls with clients and like defining who it is that you want to talk to because your brand
Mm-hmm.
should be built around that person and being attractive to that person, not to everybody in the whole. We all know that it's true. You can't be all things to all people. So making sure that you're at least all things to the right people is the right way to build a brand the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And on the APIS side, we're here, we're a resource, without doing too much selling. It's our job to help our clients answer these questions for themselves, and there's no
Mm-hmm.
universal answers. I think we as marketers look at the great examples out there. Like everybody leans to Apple or Google or Samsung. There are many, many great companies that do branding well, have very strong brands in the marketplace. But every brand is different in what that means to any organization and how they go about their day-to-day business is a different thing. And that really is what
Mhm.
our expertise, I guess, and more particularly, Jane, your expertise, is working with people to help them define their brands and really bring that to bear in the marketplace and in their marketing. Um,
Mhm.
do you have any kind of final thoughts on that note, Jane?
Well,
Parting
and
words?
I think the thing is, so for branding, it can be a process and a project, but the hope for that is that it makes all the other decisions after that much easier. And so you're spending the time up front to do the work to win back time on the back end. That's the part of the goal for it as well, I think. And so if you think about it as an investment in the long-term marketing plans that you have, as well as sort of your business overall, it is, there's always questions of how do you measure brand and all that sort of thing, but really it's a foundational piece to setting up all this other work that will happen once that's done. And so I think it's an important investment in a company, and it can be done in stages too. I think people think about brand and it sounds scary, like a big, huge project, and it can be, but it doesn't have to be, right? We can look at it in uh, a way that is more um, friendly and less scary in how we manage it, how we break it apart. Um, because at the end of the day, it's really about having that clarity around who you are so that you can make decisions easier when you get to those other steps.
Yep.
And I think it's a great opportunity for a lot of our clients to um, take a minute and just sort of look at where they are and, you know, see how do they stand up sort of to some of the different principles that we've talked about today.
Yep. Yep. The example that I like to use of that is the Gettysburg Address.
Yep.
Everybody knows 4 score and 7 years, right? Like there is a certain part of any long thing that is going to have longevity and it's going to carry through and that people are going to remember and that communicates the most impactful and important part of your message. And yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you can write a speech and you can give that speech, and at the end of the speech, there's going to be one line that everybody remembers from that speech. And the shorter the
Yep.
speech is, the more control over you have over which line it is that people are going to remember.
Yep.
So I like to think of it as, like we're editing the Gettysburg Address. We want to make sure that like people get down to the very specific series of lines because of course it's all important. There's not a
Mm-hmm.
word of it that is in any way not impactful or not important to the overall, but making sure that, particularly in the business sense, that we're focusing on the highlights and not the
Yep.
all of the lights. Um, so
Yep.
I think that
Definitely.
will conclude this episode. By all means, please subscribe, follow the podcast. We do this somewhat regularly. We would love to be more regular about it, and we're trying. And to that end, if you have thoughts, if you have questions, if you have ideas, by all means, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll do another podcast on a topic that is near and dear to your heart. And I guess on that note, signing off for all of Apis, I am Jason Schutte, our creative director, and I wish you all the wonderful things in the world.